when you're early 2 a.m. climbing through the icefall and the sky's turning pink, and I mean, it's just stunning. When you're on top of Everest, it's like being in an airplane. The raw beauty and the rareness of the air and just how exotic the landscape feels is what continues to pull me there and drive me to go back.
Dr. Jon Kedrowski is an adventure coach and seasoned mountaineer who helps athletes prepare for their biggest expeditions. Jon holds a PhD in environmental geography, weather, and climate, and he's summited Mount Everest 4 times. Jon knows firsthand how transformative the mountains can be, which is why he loves coaching people on their own adventures, whether that's reaching the top of a local summit or taking on the world's tallest peak at Mount Everest. I'm Shelby Stanger, and this is Wild Ideas Worth Living, an REI Co-op Studios production presented by Capital One and the REI Co-op MasterCard. Dr. Jon Kedrowski, welcome to Wild Ideas Worth Living. You have surely lived some wild ideas.
Thanks, Shelby. It's good to see you. It's good to be here.
Yeah, we actually connected at Running Man. I'd heard of you many times before. Dr. Jon guided past guest Mike Posner up to Everest. So you've done a lot of amazing things. I'm really curious, before we get into like the Everest mindset and what you're known for, how did you even get into outdoor adventure? Like, do you remember the first time you went on a trip or an adventure that really changed the way you think about things?
Yeah, I mean, I grew up in the mountains in Colorado, and so we had all the Colorado 14ers nearby. And as like a young kid, my parents took me backpacking and camping and hunting with my dad a lot. And so I had the opportunity before the age of 10 to do numerous hiking and backpacking trips. Every Friday was a ski day in the winter. And so you walked across the ski bridge with your class on a Friday morning, and we'd go skiing in January, February, and March. And that was the culture. And so I'm a skier first. When I look at a mountain, yes, I'm a mountaineer, but I'm a ski mountaineer. I look at something and how do I ski down that? And that's what I first think of when I see a mountain. And like once I turned 15 and I got the learner's permit to the car, my mom would let me drive the car to trailheads and I would just go hike mountains. And back then there was like one guidebook to the 14ers and it was very, very basic, just telling you where the trailhead was. You know, it's Jerry Roach's first edition of the Colorado 14ers book is how I got started climbing the Colorado 14,000 foot peaks.
So did you start climbing 14,000 foot peaks at age 15?
Mm-hmm. So that first summer I did like 23, I remember, and I would take the dog if it was like an easy hike, so I wasn't alone. And then if it was a more difficult one, like the Maroon Bells or Capitol, my mom would say, take your little brother. So my little brother and I went up, and I have photos of me up on Capitol Peak and my brother on the knife edge. We had wearing cotton shirts and jeans and sweatpants and no helmets. And we found our way to the summit of Capitol Peak when we were, 15, 16 years old. I had some other mentors too. Like I went to a few different like sort of summer camps in the valley where I met, people that could climb, and I learned climbing a little bit. Didn't know a ton, just like top roping and stuff. So we never carried ropes with us. We just went and scrambled and figured it out ourselves. And I think that's kind of like life sometimes, right? Like you face hard challenges and you have to kind of figure it out. And that's kind of what we did on the mountains. That sometimes we failed. We turned around because we were too scared, or we just didn't feel like it was the right conditions or scenario, or it was too hard at first, or what happens if we fall. But you can't worry about it in life what happens if you fall. You just have to go for it.
I mean, you're young when you did this. Like, what was the biggest lesson you learned from, sleeping on these summits at such a young age?
To expect the unexpected. Most of the season I did it in monsoon season too. So this was really challenging. Storms could move in at any time during the summer. But once it was the end of the summer and it was changing from monsoon season to the dry season of September where there's no storms. And so then at the end of the project, I rattled off like 13 peaks in 15 nights or something like that. But it's also a reminder to never let your guard down, because I think I had like 4 mountains left, and on Mount Harvard, I went to bed. There was a little bit of a storm from a cold front that was going to come through that night, forming on some peaks to the north of me. And the front kind of came down towards me after I fell asleep. So long story short is that the storm came through and I felt this buzzing and zapping, and I jumped out of the tent in the nick of time, and then I almost got struck by lightning. And then the lightning hit the tent and melted the tent poles together and put holes in the tent. And when that happened, I didn't find out till the next morning because I ran down as the lightning was kind of hitting the summit. I got off and out of the way just in time. I ran down about 200 yards, got lower, and then these storms move fast. So it hailed for like 10 minutes, and then the storm moved away and skies opened up to stars. And I went back up and I just crashed back in the tent, went to bed, woke up in the morning, and there was like melted tent poles as I tried to take the tent down. There were holes in the tent, and it got baked pretty good.
Jon has come a long way from those early days. Over the last 25 years, he's become an expert on weather patterns and mountain safety, and today he teaches geography and environmental science at Colorado Mountain College. When he was a doctoral student, Jon interned at Mount Rainier and Glacier National Park. There, he learned outdoor skills like wilderness first aid and crevasse rescue. On his breaks from school, Jon would travel the world to visit places where he could climb high mountains. He's climbed more than 1,200 peaks in Colorado, and in the early 2000s, he took on 2 of the 7 summits. Then in 2008, Jon flew to Nepal to present a research paper, and he ended up trekking to Everest Base Camp. That was his first introduction to the tallest mountain in the world, and Jon immediately knew he would be back. Talk to me then about, your first time to Everest. What was it like? And then why did you decide to keep coming back and kind of make this a big part of your career?
Yeah, I did some other expeditions prior to Everest to make sure I at least, in my opinion, deserved to go. I didn't want to just show up and kind of, hey, I hadn't done any big mountains really. I was surprised though when I went to Everest in 2012. I showed up on an expedition where there were maybe 10 other team members that all had just paid to be on the permit, and we weren't really working together. And some people hired personal Sherpas and some people didn't. At the time when I got there, I met a guy by the name of Eric, and he was also there just like I was. He had paid to go, but he didn't hire a Sherpa. He didn't hire any sort of extra help on Everest. And so we said, oh yeah, let's hike together. Let's like climb through the icefall together. We can share a tent in some of the camps and stuff like that. And so we kind of started doing that on the trip, and that was great. And then, at the time I didn't have a personal Sherpa because it was too expensive. And so I was surprised though, because we did have team Sherpas that set up some of the carried some of the stuff up. We had a cook in camp too. That was really cool. So we already had some degree of help. And you go through and the Khumbu Icefall is already made. Like they put the ladders in, the ropes in. So to some degree, after even doing Aconcagua and Denali, I personally thought early on Everest was the easiest expedition up to that point because all the help that's there, the assistance. And that's one surprise for me. And then the other surprise for me was that it's such a packed mountain. But you have to expect that on the highest mountain in the world. And so as the expedition went on, we went up and down and did our rotations. I think I did 5 round trips through the icefall because I had to do multiple carries because I didn't have extra Sherpa to help carry some food and gear. And then it was time to try for the summit. And even though I was within 500 feet of the summit in 2012, we had a tragedy. It got really windy. I turned around, went all the way back to base camp. And then a Sherpa on our team named Jangbu, who was the Sirdar of the overall expedition, managing the personal Sherpas of some of the clients, he had to go back up and check on people, 2 or 3 people that were still going to try for the summit in Camp 2. And he said to me, hey, Jon, I'm going back up to summit. Do you want to come with me? And I said, oh my gosh, that's amazing. Yeah, I'd go with you. That would be like if LeBron James came and asked you to play horse. Would you say no? Like this guy had summited Everest like 11 times. And then we climbed all the way up and we did something that was really cool that year. We skipped Camp 1 and skipped Camp 3. We didn't even sleep in those camps because we had to get up to the summit for a summit window, and then eventually made the summit in 2012. And so, yeah, I guess to summarize the first summit of Everest, it changed my life in ways that it motivated me to see what else was possible in my life and my career.
When he got home from the 2012 expedition, Jon participated in a documentary about Everest called Into the Death Zone and came out with a book called Sleeping on the Summits. Through the book and documentary, Jon made connections that opened up opportunities for speaking, writing, and more climbing. In 2015, he returned to Everest on a sponsored expedition. What started as a routine climb became a life-changing event. A deadly earthquake struck the mountain while he was at base camp.
We were hanging out in base camp, getting ready to walk into the dining tent, and the whole entire glacier just started shaking. And it was just like boom, boom. And after about 20 seconds of it, we were like, well, this is an earthquake. Like, what in the world? The sound of the grinding of the glacier and the rocks and just how loud it was. It shook for 2 minutes, and then it stopped. The 3-mile-long ridge line that was above Pomori, which is across from Everest, this ridge line was 3 miles long with like big ice chunks and seracs and ice chunks the size of football stadiums, collapsed. And it accelerated down for almost 5,000 feet down the valley and hit the glacier next to the base camp. And the air blast from the ice blocks the energy had to go somewhere. So the energy went across the base camp like a bomb. And it blasted the camp and blew things apart like a bomb, like a tornado or a hurricane, and tossed people, rocks, tents, all kinds of stuff just got tossed for hundreds of yards from the air blast, and that's what killed people.
And where were you?
We were in base camp, but we were above it, like at the high end of base camp. So where it went across was maybe 100 yards down from us, 200 yards down from us. So we witnessed it all, but we got like just barely powder dusted by part of the air blast, but not hit very hard because we're out of the direct path. And then we kind of saw things flying and we're like, this is weird. Let's go down and see what happened. We walked down in there and there's people were dead. People were injured. A man was impaled by a tent pole. Like, it was just crazy. And so it was really shocking to watch it, but it was like, well, okay, now how can we help? We're okay. Let's see what the full extent of this is. And so 20 people died 100 yards from me in the base camp. And we were carrying dead bodies and we were carrying alive bodies to places where they could be cared for. And then I stayed for a few weeks because we really couldn't travel anywhere. The whole country was decimated by that earthquake. 10,000 people died in Kathmandu and other parts of the towns. And then I also collected some earthquake data for the U.S. Geological Survey before I finally went home. But the season was over. We didn't get to climb. And when I came home, I hugged my parents, my family, and just I live life different every day after that day. Like, I don't really have bad days anymore, to be honest. If I do have one, I kind of put it back in check and say, like, wait a minute, that could have been me wiped out. So, like, I've got so much to live for. So why would I have a bad day? It's changed my mindset forever.
Let's play a game. If you could turn your everyday spending into limitless possibilities, what gear or apparel would you grab? What ticket would you book? Which wild idea would you make a reality? All right, I'll go first. If I could go anywhere and do anything like right now, I'd pack my bag for a surfing and hiking trip to Chile. The good news is that the REI Co-op MasterCard is the perfect card to support wild ideas like mine. It has you covered with rewards and benefits that encourage your love of the outdoors. This card is exclusively for REI Co-op members, taking your membership even further with card rewards on every single purchase, whether you're shopping at REI or anywhere else. And you can redeem your card rewards as you earn them, so you can finally grab those new hiking boots you've been eyeing, stock up on snacks, and keep more cash in your pocket. Head over to rei.com/mastercard-podcast to see if you're pre-approved today. That's rei.com/mastercard-podcast. Terms apply. A few years after finishing his doctoral degree, Dr. Jon Kedrowski started guiding other people on their own outdoor adventures. A lot of work and dedication goes into summiting the world's largest peaks. There's the physical and mental training, but it's also a major financial commitment. Big mountain expeditions like these are often very expensive, like $30,000 minimum. In fact, he's had to get creative in order to fund his own trips. finances are one of the biggest things that keep people from doing wild ideas. How did you make it work financially?
I kind of went into some debt because I just was traveling a lot, but I didn't really have the means. I was just putting stuff on my credit card, and it just was like sort of a few years in there where I didn't really know what the heck I was doing. And in 2014, like I did a Kilimanjaro trip that was a train wreck because I didn't manage it right. I lost money on it. And then I had some sponsors sponsor me for the Everest Lhotse trip in 2015. But when the earthquake happened, I didn't really we didn't get to climb. And so I didn't really have anything from that except that experience, which still was kind of people wanted to know about it. But I was just putting stuff on my credit card, and it just was like sort of a few years in there where I didn't really know what the heck I was doing, and I didn't make a lot of money. So all these sort of things were snowballing, and I just was like, all of a sudden I was like $100,000 in debt. And so then, right after the earthquake, 2015 into 2016, I saw that Uber was really starting to become popular, and it had just come into the mountains. And in a mountain town like Vail, there was no drivers really. And the cost of living's high, and there just wasn't a ton of people driving. And I've always been a college professor. So even on days where I was teaching a class on like a Tuesday or Thursday night, I would like teach from 3 to 6. I'd get out and I'd bring my papers with me and grade while I was sitting, and then I'd go drive an Uber, sit again, grade. And I found that like an hour and a half of grading and like through 3 hours of driving, and all of a sudden I'd go home by like 9 or 10 and go to bed. I'd make $200-300. And if you make $200 or $300 a night on, let's just say 3 days a week, let's say I was adding an extra $1,000 a week into my pocket, I was making $4,000 a month on Uber. And I was barely driving 2-3 days a week at that time. I made 30 to 50 grand extra a year on the side as like a side hustle. People were getting in my car, and I'd hand them and this was after my first 2 books came out. So like I handed out business cards, and the business cards had a photo of me on the summit of Everest, and then my website, and then the names of my books. And so they'd get curious. And my website has like a keynote speaker page. It has like all the things I do. So then a CEO one time from Charles Schwab got in my car, and he looked at my website, and he called me up and said, I'm going to hire you for your keynote speech for $20,000. So like, you never know who you're going to be around, and you're never too good for any job, in my opinion. And it goes back to controlling the things that you can and can't control. Yep. I couldn't control the fact that I wasn't getting clients. I didn't know how to run a business. I can only control my own education, where I was at, and this desire to do something about it. And I had some great stuff out there. People just didn't know about it. I mean, I kind of think that's sometimes what happens to people too, is like in this day and age of social media, you can kind of just get lost in all the content. But by going out and driving Uber, like I still have a business card. I still have books that I've written. I've been in some documentaries. I have a website. How am I going to get in front of more people? Well, even though I'm driving Uber, I did like 25 rides one night. Cool. Like all these people got my business card.
Over time, Jon developed his career as a speaker and author while expanding his guiding business. Some of his clients aim to ski down Denali, while others are trying to climb Aconcagua or Kilimanjaro. In 2020, Jon actually worked with one of our favorite podcast guests, artist and musician Mike Posner. Mike had already walked across America, but he was ready to go after his next wild idea, and he hired Jon to be his coach.
Mike was like, hey, I just got done walking across America. I think I want to try to climb Mount Everest. And I'd already, up to that time, had guided a client one-on-one in 2019 on the north side of Everest. So when Mike called me, we did a series of phone calls, and then I just said, well, hey, the best way for me to get to know you and meet you, because this whole journey, you're going to be with me a lot. You got to figure out if you even like me. I said, come out to Vail. I do a 2 to 3 day sort of intro to mountaineering training course where it's not just the skills out there, but it's more the let's get together, spend time together. We do like an acclimatization hike. I do some basic skills with like ropes, see how they walk on crampons and ice axes. And then we also do a couple of different 2 to 3 hour like goal setting sessions. We just sit and talk and whiteboard essentially. And I use that period as well to assess their fitness. It's not all hard work either. Like, for example, I might book like a mountain hut and we just go spend an evening in a mountain hut, go up and then go out and hike a mountain for sunrise. And through those methods, I get time to interact with the client, They got to figure out if they like me. I got to figure out if I like them. And then through that, at the end of the weekend, we then talk more deeply and say, okay, if you're serious about Everest, what's the plan now? And we build the plan together too in that first sort of sets of meetings. And then we come up with the financials of it and the plan, and now we have to execute. And that's exactly what I did with Mike when he came to Colorado. The summer with him was that, okay, he's got a great base level of fitness, but he's never climbed before. So now we have to build that into the program, and then we're going to execute on this. So yeah, and everyone's different, you know.
Interesting, because so I want to talk about how you get a client from, you know, ready to climbing, from just wanting to do something to actually doing it. Mike's an interesting guy. When we interviewed him, he was working with a coach and living in Utah. So you must have been that coach that he was working with. So what does it take to get someone Everest ready physically? And then I want to talk about mentally.
Yeah. The physical side is, you know, in a basic summary, is pretty much like a 5 to 6 day a week training, daily training. And it can be a combination of a cardio that is hiking, and then, you know, some weights and functional training. And then it's my Everest Ready philosophy involves train mountains with mountains. If you're not hiking 3 or 4 days a week for any mountain expedition, when you get to the mountain's going to win. So the end of meeting with Mike, when we decided to implement his plan, was because I knew how much time he could invest. I could create him basically an entire college curriculum. One was like, you know, basic ice climbing 101, fixed rope practice 101, ladders, you know, 201, expeditions, whatever. And we progressively built his skill set. And his desire was that he wanted to become the best mountaineer he could, but he wanted to deserve to be at Everest, right? He didn't want to show. He was like, I just want to show up and not deserve to be here. And I said, well, I think the best way to do that is that we want to turn you into complete alpinist. So we're going to teach you all the different skills. We're going to teach you rock. We're going to teach you ice, trad climbing, ski mountaineering, steep snow and ice, mixed climbing and rock. Like, he needed to learn winter camping too. So I took him, take him like on a 2-night winter camping backpacking trip in Colorado in the middle of the winter. And then we're summiting peaks on the side. And so he's got to manage his warmth, his gear. He's got to understand how to start a stove when it's freezing. All those little skills that you need when you're on Everest, you know, and it just progressed from there. And we ended up going to like 71 mountains together on like 3 different continents, because there were times where, like, I was like, hey, let's see how strong your stamina and endurance is and get you into altitude, see how the body reacts to altitude. Let's go to Ecuador. So I took him to Ecuador for Cotopaxi and Chimborazo. And when we went there, he got his butt kicked. He felt really sick. And even though he'd been in Colorado and Utah pre-acclimatizing, we went and we did Cotopaxi and Chimborazo, and he just got worked. And then I have a business partner. His name's Aaron, and Aaron is a specialized like outdoor training coach. And so Aaron took him on a day-to-day based on where Mike was living, whether it was in Vail when he eventually moved to Vail area to train with me, or when he was in Utah. And he gave him a day-to-day workout that was progressively getting him stronger too, and incorporating both cardio and functional training. And then we supplemented that with the real stuff, the train mountains for mountains philosophy and attitude. And combining all that over a period of almost 2 years is what got him ready.
So what happens if you don't live near the mountains? I saw this little story on your Instagram where you have a guy, you've set up a ladder for him just in his driveway, and it's over a snowbank, and he has to climb in his snow ice boots for Everest over these ladders, up and down, up and down, up and down. And it's scary even on your driveway. So I imagine if you're doing that over a crevasse, it's terrifying. So you have to do it 1,000,000 times in your driveway first.
Yeah, the Everest Ready mindset includes like repetition and drilling something over and over again. And my work with Mike and some of my other clients over the years has been that I teach them how to build these rope systems exactly like they are in the Khumbu, with like the fixed ropes and the pickets and all the security that, you know, they secure the ladders into place, like right in the ice fall or the crevasses, and just teach them not to fear those systems, to understand how they're even built, and then drill them over and over again in a controlled environment. And And that mindset has been great because, especially with Mike, we built this ladders course at my brother's house in Eagleville on this hilly terrain with like snowbanks and different things. And the most incredible thing about watching that evolution was that Mike learned how to really love it. It was his favorite thing in the whole expedition. And so one morning, I'm most days I'm pretty upbeat no matter what time it is. One morning, I don't know what it was. I slept bad and I'm just kind of in a weird mood walking out of base camp on our way to the ice fall. And we're starting to go up the ice fall and it's like 2 a.m. And we caught this group of hikers that was a little bit slower, maybe 3 or 4 people. And then they were waiting in line to go across this ladder. And like one lady steps aside and she's like, "Oh, you guys can go. I'm just not ready to go across this." And Mike was like, "What are you talking about? This is the best part." He's like, "Woohoo!" And everyone's kind of looking at him like, who is this guy? And then he gets on the ladder and he's like, "Coach, I'm doing it. I'm really doing it." And he's all excited. He's just having the time of his life out there on these ladders over a crevasse you can't even see the bottom of. And I was like, well, that's the attitude you got to have like in life.
While a lot of Jon's training programs focus on physical strength and learning mountain skills, there's a mental aspect too. Before they leave for their expedition, Jon works with his clients to identify their goals and what they hope to gain from the experience. In our conversation, Jon also talked a lot about the concept of re-entry after the adventure is over. He knows the impact that an expedition like this can have, and he makes himself available to his clients as they settle back into day-to-day life. What advice do you give to people who are like, "I want to go climb Everest"? What's their first step?
It's really about researching what it takes from both a financial and a equipment standpoint, and then putting the work in. You've got to be able to go and put time into it 3 to 5 days a week for at least 6 months prior to leaving. I think if you haven't been climbing a lot, you have to go all in. That's the best way to make sure, first of all, you go to the summit, but second of all, to make sure that you actually don't suffer. Because I have seen people, not just on Everest, but on other mountains that go and they sign up, but like they go and they suffer because they didn't prepare. They didn't put the work in. So I think Everest ready and being prepared to face your challenges has to come with commitment.
If you want to learn more about Dr. Jon or go on an expedition with him, check out his website, jonkedrowski.com. That's JONKEDROWSKI. You can also stay in touch directly and see his latest project on Instagram at Dr. Jon Kedrowski. That's DRJONKEDSKI. To learn more about past guest Mike Posner, you can find a link to his Wild Ideas episode in the show notes. Wild Ideas Worth Living is part of the REI Podcast Network. It's hosted by me, Shelby Stanger, produced by Annie Fassler, Sylvia Thomas, and Sam Piers-Nitzberg of Puddle Creative. Our senior producers are Jenny Barber and Hannah Boyd. Our executive producers are Paolo Motola and Joe Crosby. As always, we love it when you follow the show, take time to rate it, and write a review wherever you listen. And remember, some of the best adventures happen when you follow your wildest ideas.